Welcome to the ROI Masterclass, the podcast where vision meets strategy and bold moves create measurable results. I'm Liat Siegel, interior designer and ROI strategist with 17 years of experience. I help businesses transform properties and ideas into high-performing assets. This show is specifically for real estate investors, hospitality operators, and boutique developers who aren't afraid to take risks, challenge the status quo, and demand a return on every decision they make. Each and every week, we talk with innovators and leaders across industries about the strategies and the insights and really all the unconventional thinking that turns potential into profit every single time. If you believe that smart design, decisive leadership, and strategic risk are the keys to real ROI, you're in the exact right place. Let's dive in. Today's guest is the founder of Magnetic Real Estate, a firm built on the belief that people come before property. With over $2 billion in residential sales in New York City since 2003, he's helped thousands of professionals, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders find homes that align with their vision and purpose. After experiencing burnout in 2014, he realized that real estate isn't just a transaction, it's a transition. That insight inspired him to create the Magnetic Method, a proven process that helps clients find homes they love with less stress, more value, and deeper alignment. He's also a podcast host and author, passionate about showing people that finding their dream home is truly possible. Thank you so much for joining us today, Scott. I think that our initial conversations were so aligned that I was very excited to have you here, and I can't wait for you to share more about who you are and what brought you to where you are today.
Liat, I'm really happy to be here. Good to see you again.
So tell us more about your journey and what makes your company so unique.
We could start anywhere with the journey. I guess we could start by saying that I've been in real estate for 22 years, and it was definitely not a plan to be in real estate. What I discovered over time is that it's the same me through all the different chapters of my life where I'm helping people move forward. And as it stands, real estate is the vehicle that seems to have really allowed me to help the most people. And it's been a real joy. We are based in Manhattan. We work in Brooklyn and Manhattan. And we are operating in the luxury real estate space, all residential real estate. And it's really a people first business where we're getting to know our clients. And the thing I think that makes us a little different is that you might imagine New York is super competitive and it's all about, cutthroat and all this stuff. But really the way we operate is in a very open-hearted way. And you would be surprised at how well you can do in Manhattan when you care first. And it's an approach that I think kind of makes people go, what are you talking about? But we kind of flip the script about how to help people move forward. It's very much about them and their goals and dreams and hopes, and turning that into a vision that enables them to stay focused. That's their North Star. And then we can sort of take the reins. We know everything that we need to know about the market and all of I call that the table stakes. That's what, a good agent needs to know. But it's really the people and the emotional intelligence that pulls out the best in people and allows us to have a much more productive, nourishing, positive experience for their real estate journey.
You can really stand out in New York when it has such a terrible reputation for being so cutthroat. So it's pretty easy to stand out when you really do care, right? And you really show that with the emotional intelligence aspect that you mentioned. I don't think that a lot of people operate from that I think more people are, but I don't think a lot of people do or have the reputation of operating from that perspective. And I think people can really tell when you're authentically care and you have that through every point in the customer journey.
I learned a long time ago that if you show up curious and with a real desire to be of service, and I know that that the whole idea of servant leadership and all of those things can sort of become a little cliche. You hear it all the time, but I really do think, you look at people like Will Guidara, who wrote a wonderful book called Unreasonable Hospitality. I think going that extra mile and understanding that it's really, people make fun of like a Jerry Maguire where it's like fewer clients, less money. But I've actually found it that if you have your system set up right, you can actually provide higher level of service and be more successful, not the opposite.
Absolutely. So tell us about your burnout that happened right back in 2014. I mean, also back in, I would say 2017, 18, I had this massive burnout and it really changed the trajectory, the face of my business. How did that impact you and yours?
Well, I don't have 6 kids, Liat, so I can't complain about anything that happened to me. But I do have 3 kids and they're wonderful. But in 2014, I had my very best year. We had a wonderful year. I think we sold $75 million of real estate, which in New York it's a lot in the country, but in New York, it's like a good year. But it, for me, it was my best year. And I realized that I just was as unhappy as I'd ever been. I think my systems were just not what they needed to be. I call it like the Scott show. It was like I had to do everything and I just did not have enough good people around me. So I started talking to my clients and coaches and like, okay, am I going to leave real estate altogether? Ultimately, I decided it wasn't the business, it was just me and like how I needed to approach things. So I sort of rebuilt things from the ground up where I brought in a more talented operations person and I started to pull away the things that that are not my area of my zone of genius, right? And in doing that, it just freed me up to do the things that I love to do. And you sort of still lots of ups and downs over the last 10, 11 years, but it's become more and more, I've had more and more time to do the things that I'm good at and be more of a mentor and a coach internally within the team. And the way I like to describe it is that you're onto something when you have the time to wake up in the morning and write a book. Like I actually was able to write a book about real estate that's been such a joy. And to have that freedom means that I've got amazing people that I've surrounded myself with who are incredible, much better at certain elements of the business than I ever will be or was, but I can be more effective in certain elements. So that burnout was necessary to force me to look at what I was doing that really I shouldn't be.
Would you say that was one of your biggest challenges throughout your career, or was there maybe another one that kind of shaped the way that you approach business today?
I'll answer it in this way. Trying to take on too much and sort of do the whole thing, I think is definitely an Achilles heel for almost all small businesses, where you become you're the operator and it has to be done by you and you do it better than everybody else, as opposed to like slowing down enough to train somebody to do that work and realizing, wait a minute, if somebody has those skills, they probably end up doing it better than you. They'll have recommendations on how to do it better than you, and they can be more of a thought partner. I would say the other piece of it in terms of, what the setbacks were in real estate specifically, I'm a child. I'm going to go all the way there, Liat. I'm a child of divorce. And as a kid in a broken home, I went back and forth from parent to parent. And I have 2 wonderful parents and they're both remarried and alive, and I'm really blessed to have them in my life. But that experience of going back and forth every week, every 2 weeks, depending on how old I was, I brought that with me. And, I think what drove me, this satisfaction that I get out of helping people, and specifically in finding homes and finding buyers for their homes and helping people just in their lives in a really powerful way, did a lot of work to heal my own broken home. And I think that's also been a serious driver for me in a good way. That really underpins a lot of why I do what I do.
Wow, that's powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that vulnerability with me, with our audience. Myself, also the product of broken home, very, very, very difficult upbringing where they were just, there was constant chaos. And I also wanted to create that calm. I would move around furniture to kind of find that balance was my sanctuary. And that is what I also do for my clients today, my clients and their clients and guests. So how do you do that on a deeper level? I know that in our last conversation, you talked about having SOPs, and a lot of what you're saying now is creating the systems so that you can serve and so that your team can serve. So what are those SOPs within your business to create homes or to create a situation where your clients get the most for their property?
So SOPs, for those people out there, standard operating procedures kind of, they don't have to be so formalized in certain cases, but definitely as you think about every step of the client journey and what that looks like, for us, it's 2 kind of main buckets with, are you looking to buy a home? Or are you looking to sell a home? The selling side is kind of where you really can measure a little bit more specifically, okay, what are we spending on staging, or what are we going to do with virtual staging? Is there somebody that needs a little bit more of a budget where we can bring in furniture that we have ourselves? Sort of, I call it like the sisterhood of the traveling pants version of furniture, where we have things going from apartment to apartment and they just need to pay for the move. But in having an operations person in-house, my director of operations, every step of that gets broken out, and I can focus on business development, winning the business, bringing in sellers who are excited to work with us. And then what we say in terms of staging, we're talking about selling a home. It's, what are you investing in painting and staging, those kinds of elements that return 3x or 4x on your money every time. And sometimes you need to do painting. Sometimes you need to do proper staging. We need to bring in like a really comprehensive staging package that we would outsource. So we're going through really looking at every element of our process, from pre-launch pricing to all the marketing that goes in, all the reporting that happens as the property is getting marketed. Do we need to make adjustments? But I don't want to get too far into the weeds. But what I can tell you is that it's much more of a business process as we go through it. The magic, it happens at the beginning, where we really sit down and create an avatar. It's really a marketing exercise. Who's that avatar for? Who is going to be the buyer? And then reverse engineering our marketing towards them. So that's really, you can kind of sense my energy. That's the marketing is where I live. Like, who do we talk, writing about, how do we talk about the property? How do we call them forward, call them forth out of, nothingness? How do we sort of manifest our buyer for these people? And it's getting to know the seller. Why did they fall in love with their home? You have to ask a lot of questions and really listen for what they say and what they don't say. Shifting gears to the buyer side a little bit, that process is much more fuzzy. It's much more emotional. I wrote a book, we can talk about it, that there's this emotional world that underpins the process, that it's not a transaction as much as it is a transition when it comes time to find a home. And so we are very different in that we kind of flip the script, that we're focused on the emotional side of it first, that if we can get you inspired and motivated and really dig deep and find out why you're moving forward and really help people feel like we build trust, they can open up, that it propels them to create a much more thorough vision for what they want. And then, yes, we've got to address the budget and the number of bedrooms and all of that. But if you do it in the right order, that becomes more of part of it without it being a distraction from what inspires you. If you start with the money and the bedrooms and whatever, you're like, ugh, it's not as exciting. It's like, I can't afford it. And you start to get your defenses up as a buyer. If you start with the exciting, inspiring piece, then that sort of carries you forward. And frankly, and I'm sure, we can talk more about this, people justify the emotional decision with the dollars and cents. It's an emotional decision first and foremost. And believe me, we want people to get the best price, whether they're selling or whether they're buying, depending on who we represent. But underneath that is an emotional decision. And everyone goes through this. And what I've discovered after 20 years is that no one's talking about it. You go on TV, go on social media. No one's talking about the emotional breakdown that they had at home when they lost their bid, they lost a bidding war, or when they had to go ask family for money, or all of the things that happen, and the jealousy, the friend who's throwing shade on you because they're jealous of the fact that you're about to buy a bigger house, like on and on and on. And so no one's talking about that. And that's something that really that's a conversation that has to be brought up so that people can have a better experience. So that's a very long answer to the question about SOPs.
And thank you for defining that, because it's a really important term in our world of creating and scaling, right, businesses. I think it's safe to say that you believe and you live within your business that perceived value equates to the actual value of a property. Is that right?
Perceived value, what something's willing to pay. I mean, that's it. That's what something is worth. And it's all psychology. I live and work in Manhattan. And right now there's all this noise, about the mayoral election, who's going to win. And if this guy wins, then the market's going to collapse and all this stuff. And that's one thing. And what the market is saying is, we don't care about that. We want to move forward in our lives. So psychology is all there is. So if you have buyers who are excited to be in New York and you have sellers who want to get out of here for whatever reason, that's a very active market. So we're trying to tap into people's longing and discontent. They want to move forward. They're ready for the next thing. And if somebody else is, we're able to match somebody who, really is ready to leave New York, that's what makes the world go round.
Do you think that buyers and sellers are equally, well, more so the sellers, that they're open to staging, to changes like a fresh coat of paint or creating essentially a blank canvas by, removing their stuff or decluttering? Are they open to that? Is that a hard sell for them?
I'm going to take it from a different angle because I think it's important to get under the hood, the mindset of a seller. They don't want to do it. They don't want to have to paint. They don't, it's not about a roof or, it's not a single family house. Do I really want to paint and do all this work to get this house ready? And the answer is no, I don't want to do it. They wish desperately that an agent would say, oh, forget it. You don't have to do it. We'll just sell it like it is. But that really often does a real disservice to the value. So you have to have the confidence to go into a meeting and say, I know you don't want to do this. I wish I could give you a pass, but these pink walls have got to go. And so I would say almost every time there's work to be done, and you just have to break the news gently in a lot of cases. And some people don't want to hear it. And I think we'll walk in with buyers and we'll see a property that didn't get the love that it needed, didn't get the staging attention. And it's really, it impacts the sale price, bottom line. And more so, significant.
Yeah. And how long it sits on the market too, because ultimately everybody's home has their personality in it. Even if it was designed by a designer, it has personality for the actual person living there. And you need to kind of take that away. You need to strip that back so that the potential buyer comes in and they can imagine themselves in the space, which is why I love calling it a blank canvas. Removing the curtains so you can let more light in, staging with not a lot of furniture and just having it in the right positioning, fresh baked cookies for the smell, and all these little things that you don't want to have to do, but it can actually equate to hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially in New York, right? And depending on where you are, it could make such a huge difference in the way that a property is perceived and thus its value. And making those small fixes, and when somebody sees that it's not painted correctly, to them they see it as there's something wrong with the house, and that's huge. So is that part of your magnetic method, and is there more?
There are 4 steps or 4 pillars to the magnetic method. There are 4 A's. So the first is activate, which is what we've been spending a lot of time talking about, getting people motivated, inspired to move forward, getting them off the couch if they're trying to buy, getting them out in the world, ready to go, getting them, okay, we've got to paint, we've got to declutter, we've got to do all that stuff. In the case of selling, we take all that on. So it's like getting a seller ready to go is pretty much, okay, I'm going to sign paperwork and we're ready to go. The second step is where it starts to, the rubber really meets the road, which is align. You're trying to align all the parties. You're trying to make sure that, because 71% of all buyers are couples. They have different communication styles. They're not always exactly on the same page. One person's more motivated than the other. One might try to sabotage the deal. That one person doesn't want to sell. So you got to get them into a place where they're much more aligned with each other. But there's also the same component of vision building and getting clear on what would I love in this next chapter of my life. So asking provocative questions, really allowing the truth to kind of come out. I call it like a neck down experience. It's like, what does your heart say, not what your head says? And so you can have a checklist, Liat, go into a property that supposedly checks all the boxes and feel nothing. And you're like, wait a second, this doesn't work for me. Why? I don't understand. It's because you think you know what you want, but you don't. And in my book that I write, I say, you have no free will in real estate. You think you know what you want, but you have no idea. So my job in getting things aligned is creating the conditions where the truth comes out, whether you like it or not. And in certain markets, depending on where people are listening, I encourage people to make more offers on property. If it checks enough boxes on your list, make an offer. Because if the seller comes back and says, hey, we're accepting your offer, and you feel nothing, well, then there's your answer. That's the truth. So it's a lot of provoking that, eliciting the real answer. And then the third step is what we call amplify. So you're really like piling on, and really that is where communication really plays the biggest part. It's like you're starting to get on a roll, and you're making more offers, you're seeing more properties, you're really in it, and it allows for more intuition to come into play. The real answers just start to come through. Agents start to have a feel for how to help you move this along. And finally, and this is the part that I think is really counterintuitive for people. The last step is attract. I believe that if you create the conditions, your home, your buyer will be brought to you. That this process can be a lot simpler, a lot less of a grind. There's this whole mentality in the world, like rise and grind, work hard and hustle, side hustle, all this stuff. And believe me, like I worked my tail off in the beginning of my career, but I think there's a way to work smarter. And sometimes we forget that. We think we can just muscle through, and it might work for a while, but in your search, I think there's a more elegant, graceful way of doing it so that things kind of flow. And when I say attract, it's like, the idea comes to you, you're talking about the home you want with your friends. Someone says, hey, they send you a listing. What about this one? Everyone's working. It's like the hive is working for you. It's a very collaborative process that is different than I think what you hear from people, like that it has to be confrontational or negative. I have a lot of clients who are in Israel and other countries, and negotiation becomes like one person has to win and one person has to lose. I do not agree with that. I think there are ways for it all to be win-win. And, that maybe I get laughed out of the room by somebody who says, no, there's always a winner and there's always a sucker. And I just don't think that's true. Certainly not in the way that I want to operate, and the way that I think serves my clients.
Is that because there's always a home for someone?
What I think is that, I just reject the idea that the only way that things are good in a real estate transaction is if you rip somebody else's face off. It's just not, if that's the way I just don't think that that's a sustainable way of making the world a better place. I think that there's a way, sometimes you get a great deal, and I'm certainly interested in helping my clients get the best deal possible, but it doesn't have to be necessarily at the expense of someone else. I mean, there's subtlety in there, but I think if your intention behind trying to get a deal done is that you're going to get one over on someone else, I think that energy backfires on you all the time. Absolutely. And maybe it doesn't come back to you on the deal, but maybe it comes back to you 20 years later when it's time to sell. I think the phrase is karma is undefeated, right? It's going to come out at some point. And I find that when you don't trust people, then, people don't trust you. People act a certain way. And if you start with trust, you find that the whole process runs a lot more smoothly. And, if you talk to CEOs around the world, you find that they're like the friendliest, most grateful people out there. They're so kind in many respects. And I think that there's a way of doing business that ends up where there are a lot more winners than losers.
I really love your heart-centered approach because it's so in line with everything that we share on this show. Authentic connection, authentic business, operating from the heart. My methodology is called the ROAD method, return on emotional, environmental, and experiential design. It makes life more enjoyable when you're operating from a place of how can I help? How can I do good? And you're not constantly looking over your shoulder. And it's a wonderful way. It's really a wonderful way to do business. So I applaud you very much.
You talked about 2014. That was the real turning point where you're like, wait a minute, we can do this whole thing. It was more about learning to kind of articulate those values, not just to myself, but to a team. How do I convey that? How do I transmit that? And then, let the proof in the pudding, let your results speak for themselves, and let people get excited about working together. And if somebody proves themselves, it sort of rises up. Somebody is just not rowing in the same direction, and then they leave, and that's okay. But I think ultimately, you just have to hold true to your own values and to what works for you, and knowing that it serves clients best.
So you're ultimately not just building culture of your company and with your clients, but you're ultimately also building culture within your team so that they can also replicate that in how they interact with clients.
100%. I think we have people who've left who, for any number of reasons. And I think that they are better professionals because they think about how they treat, their clients in a very different way. I hope so.
What do you see in terms of what makes a property stand out and get the highest return on investment?
Someone put it really, really well recently when it came to properties that 50 years ago, buyers came in expecting things not to be perfect. They just expected things to have flaws, like a house is going to have something wrong with it. That's okay. And now buyers come in expecting perfection. It's a 180. A lot of that's based on reality TV and social media and perfect pictures, and everything's curated. I got married 20 years ago, and you look at the wedding industry and how everything is so perfect on social media. It changes the way that you think about it. It's all of a piece. And so what sells best are really highly curated images in a home where every little nook can have a moment. So we're focused on the homes that sell best are where you can create those moments. We just put something on the market this week that is highly curated in a very highly designed. And it's funny, she painted something. She actually, the owner painted this cool piece that's in their dining room that's just kind of interesting and has a little different vibe to it. We got a full asking price offer on day one, and it's really fast. And so nicely renovated property sells quickly. High design sells quickly. And what doesn't, unfortunately, is and so many properties that come on the market are estate condition. Those properties will often languish. The sellers can't control the cost of renovations in the marketplace, but the cost of renovation after COVID doubled almost in many cases. And so if you have a renovated property, or you're considering what can I do that's going to really up my ROI on selling, if you have the stomach to do some work, I would say somebody it's a matter of how are you connected to what is cool and hip and interesting. But on my block, there's a $7 million townhouse on the market, and it was not selling, and they have the means, they have the resources to do a renovation. So they've been doing a renovation prior to selling their home because they know that they'll get a top dollar for it. So, it's a real function of knowing the audience and whether they have the stomach or interest to do work, and otherwise just presenting the most curated product possible.
Do you think that there's a ratio, a percentage of what needs to be spent to how much return you'll get?
Well, obviously don't forget, somebody who owns that property, maybe even outright, it might be costing them. It depends on how you wrap your head around this financially and do models, right? If you sell it today versus sell it in a year, you have to look and see, well, mortgage rates are coming down. The property's probably appreciating anyway. And if somebody can spend $500,000 or 750, or even just do baths, do a few things that get you further down the field when it's time to renovate, so that somebody can, I can live here, or whatever. I think the return is probably somewhere in the vicinity. It's really hard to measure. It's based on the certain size of apartment, but I think you could spend less in a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom apartment and probably get the most return. If you're doing a gut renovation on a bigger property, if you put in $500,000, do you make an extra $500,000? I think it's possible, for doubling your investment, but then there's a lot of other stuff that that erodes some of that return. But I think there's no question on a case-by-case basis, and we consult our clients all the time. We would look and say, how do you value engineer this a little bit? What do you spend that's an appropriate, smart way to do it? And again, you said it, depersonalize a property so that it's appealing. But I think it's dangerous waters depending on the person, because somebody will say, I can do this myself. Mixed results. I think bring in professionals to do this, and you'll have a better experience, probably a better outcome.
Absolutely. I mean, even in the beginning of my career, I've been doing design for 17 years now. At the very beginning of my career, even though I went to school for design and, I had jobs in design and all of that, I messed up in the beginning. I went, even for my own home, I would mix and match different styles because I didn't understand that you can't have a key element, like multiple key elements. And when you're trained in design or in real estate, you've seen it again and again and again, and and you see the patterns and you know how things go and you know how to create a cohesiveness. It's a different outcome entirely than picking finishes yourself, and also the construction end of things. It's one thing to pick them, but the installation and the quality of job is a whole nother story, because it's a silent revenue driver. Buyers can tell when they come in if it's quality or not.
And they can't articulate it sometimes. It just feels better. It just sometimes just feels better. And so it actually, you're totally right. And then people will say, oh, it's something, they'll give another reason, why it doesn't work. And you're like, I know why it doesn't work. It's because the construction's lousy. It feels cheap.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. The grout, the grout and the tiles aren't even, there's so many different nuances, small nuances that a design professional or somebody project managing will catch and be able to fix and help you ensure that you're protecting your asset value.
Yep.
What are you seeing in terms of trends in the marketplace? Where are things headed? Crystal ball time.
More colorful, more patterns. I think people are sick of neutral palette in terms of, obviously, like you walk in, I think people are sick of just the run of the mill. It doesn't matter how nice the finishes, the appliances are. At some point, people are a little bit sick of neutral. I think there's a real push for more color and design and like detail and visual, like a lot going on. So I would say, that's appealing to people. And again, like little moments mean more right now. So I think that's a push in design in general. That's kind of what I'm seeing, like more like two different patterns next to each other. We're seeing a lot of that.
Maximalist approach.
Maximalist, good way to put it. I don't have the lingo around it. And, in terms of real estate itself, there was this push for bigger and bigger and bigger spaces. And I think you still see people who want to have really large apartments, but there's also the monthly cost of that. So there's a real push-pull about how big a property can be. And right now it's how do we sort of make it work in New York, because the suburbs are not very, there's no inventory and nowhere to go. So a lot of people are in New York, whether they like it or not. So they're renting and rents are up. But, apartments are there. How do we figure out how to make apartments work? I think there's a lot of people who want to maximize, to turn dining rooms into bedrooms and really kind of turn their living into multiple spaces. So, that's what I'm seeing in New York. But it's an interesting time. I think you see a lot of buyers who are making interesting choices here to sort of live here and stay here. People still want to be in New York.
Leave our audience with 3 tips if they are buying real estate, selling real estate, if they're buying a home, selling a home. What would you tell them?
First, I would say that I just wrote a book about real estate called The Pursuit of Home, which is all about the home buying experience. So that's what my recommendations are rooted in what I've seen over 20 years. Number one, and you might be surprised that more than 70% of people hire the first real estate agent that they meet. And certainly I hope that if I meet someone, they want to hire me, great. But I would say take the time to be prepared. And that means getting to know yourself a little bit, what your own communication style is, right? Around, are you data driven? Are you more emotional? Are you very much like, give it to me in bullet points? What is your communication style? And find an agent that speaks your language, that can communicate information in that. That's going to help you relax and get clear on what it is that you really want. So I think take that time to prepare a little bit. Number 2, communicate, over communicate. You have to tell your spouse what it is you really want. I just was meeting with a guy who said he probably got divorced because he couldn't tell his wife that he didn't want to live in a townhouse. He wanted a single family house, and he ended up moving into this house, and he wasn't happy. He was annoyed, and he blames himself for bad communication. So I say, be in communication with your partner about what you want, and then be in communication with your agent or your mortgage, whatever you need to ask for it. You need to say, I'm not feeling this. I'm like this, and let's work it out. Everything can be solved in communication. Okay. So first is take the time, be prepared, be in communication. And finally, you have to be willing to be open and vulnerable in this process. You have to be willing to to know like stuff's going to come up. If you have like money issues, they're going to show up in your search. If you have trust issues, they're going to show up in your search. Be ready for stuff to have meltdowns, be ready. Like you're going to have a breakdown here and there, whether you're buying or selling, you're going to have a moment where you lose your temper. It's one of the most stressful things people go through. And there's a way to do it that's much more positive. And I want to be very encouraging. My whole book is very encouraging of how you can go through this and have a great experience. But just know there are going to be bumps in the road. That's the truth.
Absolutely. Setting proper expectations is really key because this is literally one of the biggest assets that people own. And with that comes a lot of emotions, which is what you handle well. So I love that.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure. For our audience that wants to reach out to you, how can they do that?
If they want to check out the book, they can go to pursueyourhome.com and find everything there about the book, which is called The Pursuit of Home. Or if they want to go on Instagram or anything else, they can find me at Scottie Harris, SCOTTIE Harris, and find out about the journey and all the things I'm doing in the real estate world, all posting just about everything that I'm seeing in the New York City real estate market.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Scott. Such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's been great.